Welcome back to another episode of the Bourbon Lens with your host, Jake. Scott is taking care of the children tonight, so it is just me, and I am very excited about this because we're talking about Scotch, and we're talking a little bit about Single Cask Nation. They do American whiskey, so you'll be okay, guys. Just explore with us for a minute. So sit back and buckle into the latest episode of the Bourbon Lens. Jason Johnstone-Yellin. I have to say the whole name, right? Because if not, people wouldn't understand that you're not from America. When they hear this beautiful accent, they're going to think you're a true Southerner. But Jason, really appreciate you spending this evening with me and talking a little bit about your latest release and all of Single Cask Nation. So appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, cheers, Jake. Thanks for having me along tonight. It's lovely to be here. And yeah, the Johnston is me, that's Scotland. The Johnstons, for our family, go back 7 centuries in the southwest of Scotland, the same county that my family are still in. The Yellin is my wife. And so we brought the Johnston-Yellin together. It's a disaster. Anybody listening, do not bring a hyphen into your last name. If you plan to use air travel or social security or medical care in America, hyphens haven't been invented yet. So tread carefully.
Yeah. Well, luckily for me, my last name was long enough and my wife had wanted no part of hyphenation. So we didn't want to be the Cox Llewellyn family or the Llewellyn Cox.
Stellar name though. I like that. But when did the second L get dropped from your name? Because I'm guessing traditionally you would have been a double L start.
We would have done a double L and then would have been a Y on the back end. So it dropped when they came to America. The story goes, according to my great grandpa, and he lived to be 101 years old. So he had seen some stuff, is that there were 3 brothers in this kind of tradition. And when they got here, one of the brothers actually became a horse thief. And so to differentiate themselves, the other 2 brothers started to spell their name different. And so we got the Ellwellyn, the traditional Welsh spelling, which was the brother who got in trouble, dropped the L and did a Y on with the last, and then they did a E on the back half. So, and traditionally it's like a Flu-Ellen. So there's actually an F in Welsh that goes in front of it. It was fun when you do your like 8th grade project and you learn about like your coat of arms and where do you come from and all that stuff. It was fun. I learned a lot. And that makes me want to go and explore, the United Kingdom more, other than just going to London. So gotta get there and experience
there's
more.
A lot more to see. Yeah. And I love the fact we've got a rustling history here. So you're talking horse thieving. For us, the Johnstons, we had the Highlanders come down to the lowlands and steal sheep from us, and we would go into the north of England and steal sheep from them. Ooh. So this livestock wrangling, already our families have something in common here.
Hey, you know what?
If there's divisions along the way.
At the end of the day, that's what we want. We want a little bit of scrappiness, right? And anything you do, that means you can go after the things you need to go after. That's the way I think about it. But it is great to meet you all. This has been a long time coming. I know y'all had some trouble getting whiskey to America for a little bit, but it's here now. So that's a good thing. And that's why we're having this conversation.
For the moment.
For the moment. Yeah. Until the next tariff, right? That's neither here nor there. That was not a political statement. That was just a funny thing to say. I promise you, I'm like the most unpolitical person ever. But anywho, one of the things that is very interesting that you all have created in America, and there's been a rise in this, and you've seen it with other folks, and people have heard us talk about like Lost Lantern. They do American, single casks or blends that they've created, from an independent bottler perspective. But you actually, being Scottish, you are from the really traditional heritage of this all, right? Scotch Malt Whiskey Society, and there's countless others that are there as well. So what was the genesis or the antithesis of Single Cask Nation and why you all created it?
Yeah. For us, definitely. I've got a very early story. Which actually speaks to the misconception that has always existed around independent bottling, which is when I was starting my whiskey journey in the mid-90s at University of Aberdeen, I was in the University of Whiskey Society. And we definitely had it there where we cut our teeth on the named brands, right? The Highland Parks, Glenfiddich, Lafroig, Dalmore, and you went, oh, okay, this is the producer. This is who makes this, matures this, sells this. Okay, I get this. And then I remember getting a little bit deeper into my journey and being introduced to independent bottlers. And I always remember thinking, like, that seems like the fake Rolex or the knockoff BMW. Like, why would I take a named product from somebody who isn't making it? And so, honestly, for a good 5 years, I avoided independent bottlers, and much to my great shame and my great error. And then once I started to say, okay, tell me about these independent bottlers, the Gordon and MacPhails, the Cadenheads, the Duncan Taylors, right? Then it was, well, there's another perspective to be had here. And if Lafroig have their line or Macallan have their line, if you go with an independent bottler, you're going to get something off the beaten path. You're going to get a peek. We always talk about a peek behind the curtain. So if you know Lafroig and you love Lafroig and you come to a Single Cask Nation Lafroig, or as it's often released, Williamson, right, which is often their non-brand name spirit. So if you see a Lafroig or a Williamson from Single Cask Nation, we're going to show you our take on that distillery. We're going to go looking for iodine in some instances, where we think the portfolio or the releases from Lafroig have kind of fallen off that profile. We're going to go look for coastal sea breeze, maybe sugar cookies on a beach blanket, right, by the coast. So we're going to look to show you another side. Then, as a lover of Lafroig, only to name one distillery, you'll then find fans, independent bottler hopping. So if we put out a Lafroig or a Williamson, maybe big thumbs up. Maybe that's an exciting place to be. But then, what whiskey might put out a Lafroig, or the Scotch Malt Whisky Society might put out a release from distillery number 29, right? If you love a distillery, you can find out more about it by following independent bottlers. And I'll tell you one more thing. When we started this, Josh and I started this in 2011.
Yeah.
And we wanted to be an American-based independent bottler in the Scottish tradition. And I remember doing a very early tasting where I had an Arran. And maybe we'll get to an Arran in tonight's tasting as well. But I had an Arran. And because we only had 3 casks bottled, we would pour our single cask at cask strength next to a release from the distillery, just so people were kind of getting a bit of that OB-IB kind of juxtaposition. And I remember doing a tasting in Seattle, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, I really liked your Arran, but I didn't like their Arran so much. And I said, all I hear is that you like Arran, right? And now you're on a journey to see which Arrans you like more and less than other Arrans.
For sure.
There's no Jason and Joshua Arran here. That was made on the Isle of Arran by the good people in Lochranza, put into casks of their choosing, and we selected it. That's all we did there. So that was the beginning for me to say, if you know the OB, you can learn more from the I, and also go and learn about the OB. And we've always taken that seriously. So if we can do distillery education, if somebody meets, a Westland through us and then learns about the Seattle distillery making some of America's finest American single malt, that's why we're here. Yeah. That's why we're doing what we're doing. So there's a lot to following independent bottlers, and we've always taken that commitment very seriously.
For sure. And I find it to be very interesting as well, because independent bottlers, sometimes you can go and find the gems in the rough, right? You could say, oh man, Lafroig did a unpeated whiskey, and they might be willing to sell you that cask, right? And so you could try that, because they just did it as a one-off, and they were like, oh, we did a run, we're selling these barrels, and that's happened. It's not been Lafroig, but I know there's been some things like that have kind of been out there in market. One of my favorite whiskeys I've ever tried, that have graced my lips is a Signatory Dalmore, 33 years old. Tastes like peachos, which is like my like top like note I've ever gotten in a whiskey. And like that's nothing wrong with the normal Dalmore lineup. The normal Dalmore lineup's phenomenal, but you know, it's cool when someone else gets to see their expression and bring that forward for you. And
exactly.
You know, that's what it's about. And sharing these, right? It's all like you hear a lot of the terms with these independent bottlers, societies or clubs. It's about bringing people together with shared interest and shared emotional attachment to whiskey, which I think is great because it creates a community worldwide, which is amazing.
Yeah, and that was my start, right? I just mentioned the University of Aberdeen a second ago, right? It was sitting in a room with 30 other mostly undergraduates who were, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 years old saying, what's this all about? What is this substance that had a crash in the 80s and a crash in the 60s and was just starting to be rediscovered by a younger crowd? But it was a place to go. It was camaraderie. It was conversation. It was stories. Hence the nation, right? Hence Single Cask Nation. We really did want to bring groups of whiskey lovers together to be able to talk about whiskey, talk about single cask, talk about distilleries, right? Like we've got the Single Cask Nation Facebook page, which might be one of the last places worth hanging out on Facebook. But you actually have to sign. There's 3 questions to come in. And the third question is, and it's not really a question, but it's, I agree to not be an asshole. And you have to check that box to enter our group. And so if you then come into the group and you're kind of an asshole, we get to tell you to leave. Yeah. Because it's about whiskey. It's about distilleries. It's about the journey. It's about introducing new people to this. It's about listening to someone's so-called stupid question and treating it with respect and treating it carefully and giving them a meaningful, genuine answer. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. This entire industry is about community. And when we stop fostering those communities, we've lost something in the spirit.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And you all have created a niche, right, where you do more than just Scottish. You do American, not just American bourbon, but obviously American bourbon's kind of redundant. You do bourbon because it can only be made in America.
You've got a friend in me, Jake. I only call it American bourbon.
There you go. That's what you should do. For your Scottish people, it's American bourbon, right? You got to add the extra, I don't know. I'm bad at English. I'm bad at the English language. It's an adjective. You're describing it. Whatever it is. And then you also, you have American single malt, you have rye whiskey. Your portfolio can go really wide with all the different types of spirits that are out there. And you all haven't pigeonholed yourself, which I think is, really important. For you, when you all are kind of looking at the landscape and purveying, what's next for you all, right? This is a Scottish run, currently, how do you all decide? Do we do it American? Do we do it international? What's that look like for you all?
Really, it's often based on flavor profiles. Sometimes it depends on the story we're looking to tell with a particular outturn or a particular release. Obviously for me, you can imagine where my biases lie. The good thing about having a partner in Joshua is we share those biases, and so Scotch is first and foremost. It is a love, but we've got exciting things. Last summer we did a celebration of America, and we put out American single malt along with American rye, along with. We did American bourbon? Yeah, we did American bourbon. We actually got our hands on, you were just saying this a second ago, Jake. We got our hands on a cask. We weren't allowed to use the name of the distillery in Indiana. Everybody knows. But it was smoky. It was a smoky bourbon from this very well-known Indiana distillery.
Somewhere along Ohio, just west of Cincinnati.
Yeah, right. Right. You've all heard of it along your journey. They supply a lot of brands, sometimes buy brands of their own.
Exactly.
And so we had this smoky version of it. And we were like, that's completely unexpected. And so that was one of those moments where you think you know this distillery, try this.
Yeah.
And so for that to come out with a wider American range meant you could dabble in bourbon or rye or American single malt. And we could celebrate that for what it is and what it does with America. I would, to be perfectly honest with you, that the trickier part is bringing in those world spirits and getting a sense of what's resonating right now. Who's got a story that people are listening to? And you got to be careful there, because obviously the liquid needs to stand on its own 2 feet, but the story needs to be compelling. The price point has to be right. Sometimes the age gets out of whack with the price. And so, Josh and I have always said we're whiskey lovers, we're whiskey nerds, whiskey geeks, first and foremost. And so if the bottling doesn't make sense to us, we don't expect it to make sense to the nation. So we're always very careful about that. And so we're always, okay, what have we brought in sherry that can now come in bourbon? Who have we had with a rye who we could now bring in a bourbon? Who's an American single malt producer that we've been talking about? And maybe someone's in their state, or maybe they've collaborated with someone. So there's always, as an independent bottler, there's no standard lineup that we stand behind day in and day out. There's no set of ages that we present day in and day out. I remember we put out a 7-year-old Glenmurray, and people would email us at info@singlecasknation.com and would say, like, 7. Like, you never see a 7-year-old whiskey. Like, why did you choose a 7-year-old whiskey? It was very simple. It was delicious.
Yeah.
And so we bottled it because it was delicious. So, you don't have to overcomplicate this. So I know I've given you kind of a complicated answer to make it sound like my job is particularly difficult. But, we're thinking about a lot of things, but mostly we just kind of go where the mood takes us, and something that we think would be interesting to the nation.
Well, I tell you what, it sounds fun. I don't know if you overcomplicated it. I followed along.
Cheers.
But, you talk about that. And so we started, you kind of started me on this path tonight. We started with, I think this is a Highland, or is this a Highland? The Rosary is that a Highland, or is that a, where's that?
Yes, it's Speyside.
Speyside.
Yes,
yeah. So we start with the Rosary burn. And can you name?
Yeah.
Glen Tauchers? How do you say that?
Yeah, Glen Talkers.
Okay. I feel like there's a whole episode where I could, say a word and then you correct me. So that was delightful. It's roughly 15 years, right, with the finishing part of it. But I poured the Tormore 10-year-old. That thing is phenomenal. Yeah. Like, that is everything that I want out of a Scotch. It's a bourbon drinker Scotch. That's the way I would approach that from a conversation piece perspective.
Right. And I think, and that's partly why we kind of lean on the flavometer. We've had this flavometer since 2017.
Yeah.
And what we wanted to do is kind of give people these jumping off points, but that is dialed up high in a lot of places. Rich, sweet, nutty, spicy, earthy, oaky. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. A bourbon drinker, I think, is going to feel pretty comfortable in that realm.
Yeah.
The one thing that the Tormore distillery will do is drop a bit of pepper on you. So unless you've had some bourbons that have had really pronounced, new char, really lively, has brought some of the ginger or the cinnamon, but specifically masquerading as pepper.
Yeah.
That's what brings me to the Tormore distillery.
Yeah, and what I liked about it was
the age is right on that.
Yeah, 10 years I think is a nice Scotch. I know, people love and fangirl over the 15, 20, 30, 50-year-old Scotch. and it's great. I've had my fair share of them over the past couple of years. But man, if you can find a sweet spot 10-year, 12-year-old Scotch that you can enjoy, in that $45 to $65 price point, like you're going to be hard pressed to find bottles, from an everyday sipper perspective that, can beat that. It's like when I think of American whiskey, I think of Heaven Hill. I think of Bottled and Bond, right? 4-year-old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. It's every day. It's a sipper. If you can find a nice 10 to 12-year-old Scotch that you really enjoy, that could be your workhorse. Like this could be a workhorse type of drink because it's got that complexity to me. Right. It could keep you coming back. But also, if you just want to pour it over a cube, you could have a great night.
Right. And we've said that as well. If you're doing a tasting, like you've got the correct glassware, you're not diluting it to begin with, you're nosing it carefully, you're sitting with it. That's a tasting. If you're drinking, drink however it fits your palate, drink however it makes you happy. And to price point, and Joshua and I are very price conscious, here you've got a 10-year-old Tormore with sherry finishing. There's a single cask, like one of 171 bottles. Yeah. Right. At 63.2% alcohol. We sell this on our website for $100. Right. Like that's for a single cask at cask strength Scotch. Like that, we are so proud of that price. For sure. So happy with that price. And if you're in a single cask strength world, you're going to be very hard pressed to find a better deal than that.
Well, and my buddy's part of the Scotch Malt Whiskey Society here in America, and like everything he buys is 150 plus. That's no knock on them, but like, we live in a price conscious world, right? I feel like everyone is kind of always looking at the little small details. If I can save $10 here, I'm going to take that $10 savings. You're not cutting corners. You're dollars, 10 years bottling, and it's about $10 a year. You're in the safe. You can explain that to your wife or to your significant other. Hey, babe, this is how I explain this. 10 years old. It's $10 per year. Everyone can enjoy this. I'll share it with multiple people. The bottle will be gone tomorrow. Like it's here today, gone tomorrow.
Right. 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 Yeah. We sometimes talk about popping the cork on a Friday and recycling the bottle on a Monday. Yeah. Like that's to that. Like I had a good weekend. I shared it with people, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I don't regret the money I spent on it. So yeah, that really guides us in a lot of the decisions that we make. Oh,
100%. And I think that's a great thing. So we've tried kind of more my traditional whiskey profile in this lineup. Yeah. And we've teased this one a little bit. So let's go to the Isle of Arran 8-year-old peated. That's what I'm going to go with next. It just it felt right to pour that one. And so you were explaining this to me a little bit beforehand, how this distillery and this brand kind of comes to market. So can you explain a little bit about, the Isle of Arran and, how this has changed and kind of continues to move forward as a brand?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, it's about to celebrate its 30th birthday. So June 29, 1995, they started making whiskey at the Isle of Arran distillery. So I grew up in Ayrshire, southwest coast. I looked over the Firth of Clyde at the Isle of Arran. So the entire time I was growing up, Isle of Arran, sitting right there. To this day, it's still there. I'm reliably informed. And
hasn't gone.
I might see it in a few weeks. So in 95, Isle of Arran was the only distillery on the Isle of Arran. And it was in the town of Lochranza, and town is doing a ton of heavy lifting. It is in the micro village of Lochranza in the northwest of the island. And then, I want to say, 2017, Isle of Arran distillers started to build a distillery on the south end of Arran. And we often describe Arran as Scotland in miniature. So you've got the hills and the mountains to the north of the island. You've got flatter agricultural land in the south of the island. So you've got Lochranza in the north, you've got Lag in the south. They made the decision that the Lochranza distillery, the one that dates from 1995, would move away from peated spirit and would only produce unpeated spirit, while Lag in the south would only make peated spirit. And of course, to confuse matters, because we're an independent bottler, this is a 2015 distillate from Lochranza in the north of the island, and it is peated spirit. The reason I wanted to include this one is you've got all 8 years of maturation are in first fill bourbon cask. So you've got an American producer who has emptied it. They've likely, and this has changed in recent times, they've likely shipped that cask whole to Scotland. And then it's been filled with Scottish new make, and it has been left alone for all 8 years. That has been hanging out in a warehouse at the Isle of Arran distillery off the west coast of Scotland. One of the things to look for, I know we're talking peated, and I'm really interested in hearing your thoughts in 1 second. One of the things we always talk about with Arran, whether it's their peated spirit or their unpeated spirit, there's often a citrus component and there's often a baked apple component. And it's well worth looking for that as you're pegging this Highland peat on top of that. And again, as we were chatting before we hit record, Highland peat is going to give you more of a wood smoke, more of a kind of a nice warm heather kind of note to it, less so the sphagnum moss, the iodine, the band-aids that a lot of people associate with Lafroig. And so I'm curious how that all comes together for you, Jake.
Or they assume that all Scotch is like that, which it is not. Right.
All Scotch is like a dirty gym sock. Like, it's not true. Not true.
No, actually, the majority of Scotch is less gym socky. It's always, whoever is the loudest tends to be the smallest group, right? So like that's the loudest Scotch, but it's not the biggest group of Scotch.
No. So very gentle, very soft.
What's really interesting about this in particular is when I think peated, I think the first time I put my nose in the glass, boom, right? There's no boom in this whatsoever.
Right.
It is that kind of that baked stewed apple, right? Like you have gone to Cracker Barrel and you get the cinnamon apple, kind of food. Like that's kind of what I'm getting there. You can get like
a crisp or a crumble.
Like baked apples at like a country restaurant, where it's just been stewed down with cinnamon, sugar, and butter. And so you get that on the nose. You get like if there's a fire kindling just a little bit away, right? Like in grandma's kitchen, you can smell a little bit of that kind of going on. Big vanilla note that kind of like gives you a little bit of a la mode, a little bit of flavor. And then that citrus, it's like someone took a zest and just zested over top of the apple, right? So the nose is quite complex, right? Like I took you to a couple different places, but it was all in grandma's house, right? And it was how she was making these stewed apples, and she had the fire going because she was going to cook something, open fire a little bit later. And that's what you get. Now on the palate, the majority of that stays there. I think the smoke intensifies. So it's like you got the wisp while you were in the kitchen. You're eating it next to the fire, right? So you're kind of, as you take a bite, you're getting a little bit of that secondhand smoke from the actual wood fire that's burning in the house with your food, which is not a bad thing. It's just enough. It's not overpowering. It's subtle. But savory. And it balances out the sweetness. Because I think without that, it's too sweet, probably.
It's interesting. So we actually have it. Man, it just captivates me each time where I'm like, I see where this is going, and then I see where the peat grounds it. And I think that to me is where the wood smoke has a certain earthiness and it grounds the experience.
For sure.
I love this a lot. I love this distillery a lot. They were the very first distillery to say yes to selling casks to two jamokes who were talking about starting an independent bottling company in America.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say, just as I was kind of getting the smoke there, I'm always fascinated by people's palates. And anytime I meet somebody, I'm always curious, where does their palate lean? Where do they go? Even in the time you and I have spent together, Jake, I listen carefully to where it leads you, what you're liking, what you're not liking. And one of the things about me is Americans love grilled meat and barbecued meat so much. And then I suggest smoked whiskey. And they go, oh, no, that's not a thing. No. Whiskey should be bourbon, and it should be vanilla and caramel and sweet with oak. I'm like, but that meat that you're eating, like, you would love the smoked barley the way you love the smoked meat. And I'm always trying to persuade people, like, smoke is there to be met. And I think the way you've described that smoke in Grandma's kitchen is spot on, absolutely spot on. And I wish people would think of it like that, as opposed to the dirty gym sock, which it isn't.
Yeah.
Right. The myths take on a life of their own.
Oh, 100%.
And you have to battle to overcome those.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, like, what really changed this for me was actually American single malt, because you had Santa Fe Spirits that has the mesquite smoke. You also got Whiskey Del Bach, same thing, and they kind of changed the way I looked at that. Really, in all honesty, and then they did some finishes. They have a PX sherry. And so what I found is when you can get a second maturation on that, and you can bring some sweetness, or you can bring a level up, because a lot of scotches, when they finish it in really wet barrels, right? So you're getting a lot of uptick of that flavor, which I appreciate. So it's like it comes out of an X-fill bourbon, and then it goes right into like a huge wet sherry butt. Then I feel like that smokiness can be met with some sweetness. And then you're really looking at that dessert portfolio. And so you're not looking at it as like, oh, I'm going to drink this with my rack of ribs. You're going to say, this is how I'm going to balance my sweetness out with my bananas Foster or whatever delectable dessert you want at the end of the night. And so that helped me was to try to try different things, because the first peated whiskey I ever had, my buddy was like, big whiskey guy, takes me down to his basement. So it's dark and damp. He's like, you ever had a peat monster before? And I'm like, what's going to jump out and get me? I was like, no, I've not had a peat monster. That sounds scary. I'm going to be honest with you. And he's like, you need to try peat monster. So we pour it, and I still hate him to this day, because I'm like, what the hell did you just pour me, my guy? And then fast forward a couple years later, somebody's like, as a joke, they're like, we're going to do Ardbeg shots. Don't ever shoot Ardbeg. That's a bad idea. Actually, it's terrible. It's not even just bad. It's terrible.
That's funny, though. For me, Ardbeg often has a white chocolate cheesecake kind of quality to it. And sometimes in leading whiskey dinners, I've actually paired Ardbeg 10 with white chocolate cheesecake. But Jason, it was after a Chicago handshake. Oh gosh, I don't know.
You don't know what a Chicago handshake? Oh, it was after a shot of Malort and a Old Style.
Oh,
so it was the hills
in Chicago who loves it.
Yeah. So you think about that. You add. It was a bad combo.
That's it. Anything after Malort, after Malort, just go home. Your night's done. It's ruined, to be honest.
Facts.
That Chicagoans take pride in it. Should be proud of something.
That's not what they need to be proud of. Be proud that your Cubs won a World Series in the last 100 years. That's what you should be proud of.
I was gonna say the Chicago White Sox are the Malort of baseball.
Ooh, that's pretty true. They're really bad. They used to be really good, and now they're really trash. But what was not trash was that whiskey, and so this would be the last one that I would try. Oh, here we go. My Kentucky is about to come out again. Here we go, guys. Ardnamurchan.
All right, Jake, we have spent 30 some minutes together here. See, now you're warming up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go fast, run roughshod over most of the letters.
Yeah.
And say it with a very tight jaw.
Okay. Ardnamurchan. That's what I got.
And what would you say?
I said,
you're that's the closest you'd be. Ardnamurchan.
Oh,
Ardnamurchan.
It's kind of like the Muppet. Arfam. That's what the Scottish language kind of reminds me of. Like it's like a lot of syllables, like flurker, parker. You heard that before? Probably not. But
yeah, I'm gonna get you. Aye, we're coming for you, wee man. Aye.
Okay, so
it's gonna be fast tonight.
This one, so this is first fill bourbon barrel. This is also nice on the nose.
Yeah.
Not overly peated on the nose. I don't know what the parts per million is on this one, but it's nice. It's a little bit of cinnamon custard, like
right. This time you're actually on the Merkin Peninsula, so you're actually still on the Scottish mainland. You're about as far west as you can go on the Scottish mainland. If you ever go to visit this distillery, you will spend 17 miles going down a single track road. And you will meet all of the locals coming in the opposite direction as fast as they can possibly travel. But you'll also meet a bus, and you'll also meet a barley lorry, and maybe you'll meet a garbage, truck. So who the hell knows what happens down there? But for me, Ardnamurchan has this rugged Scottish character to it. The new make is rugged. I think it's very barley forward. I think the grain is in there. However, it's just across a very small, thin bit of water to the Isle of Mull. And so if you know your Lechigs, if you know your Tobermories, they're not too far over the water from there. But what it means is you've got seawater coming down near the distillery. You've got salt in the air, so you get that additional. You've got barley, you've got the grain, you've got the coast, you've got the salt, you've got the brine. Now we're going to add Highland peat to this example. Again, Ardnamurchan, just like our friends on the Isle of Arran, two distilleries. Ardnamurchan run peated and unpeated, and the peat never runs on the unpeated system. So you don't have a crossing of the Schwartzes, so to speak. Just rewatched Spaceballs with my family the other day. It was fantastic. So good.
Movies that can't be made in 2025 for $500, Alex. Spaceballs.
Has it aged well? Entirely. And so you've got this rugged, but and I think as you're sitting there nosing it and tasting it, I think you would be quite surprised if I told you this is 64.9% alcohol. I think it handles that alcohol particularly well. And one of the things was full cask strength. You shouldn't be afraid. And I know with bourbon fans, and certainly for a lot of the nation here in America, 60 doesn't scare people. 63 doesn't scare people. 64.9 doesn't scare people. We know what to do with a higher strength here in America.
Yeah, you drink it. But, honestly, I've become a lower proof drinker. I really enjoy 95 to 105. I think that's my sweet spot. That's where I enjoy most whiskeys on special occasions, right? We'll drink, proofed up, expressions like we are today. But I tell you what, you could tell me that's not peated and I wouldn't bat an eye at it. Like that's a bourbon drinker's peated whiskey, right? Like there's a subtle smokiness on the back end. I get that from a lot of American bourbons, like that have been a little bit overcharred, where you get a little bit of that pop of smoky, meaty, barbecue-y. That's what this is. Smoky, meaty, barbecue-y. You could tell me that's not peated, and I would be like, nope, not peated.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, no, that covers good ground. I like that a lot. Yeah.
Because
there's I don't know if I actually showed this for the Ardnamurchan amongst us.
the
64.9.
The Flarkins. For all those people out there that speak Muppet. To be honest, really there's not a bad whiskey in this. There's one of my favorite Instagram accounts is actually there's no bad whiskey. He's a liar. There is bad whiskey. He just doesn't talk about the bad whiskey that's out there. Because, some people just need to go back to the drawing board. This is the way it is. You don't have to go to the drawing board on any of these. These are really great casks that I really think you all did a phenomenal job. As someone who is not an astute, Scotch whiskey drinker at all, I've thoroughly enjoyed these. They have given me a sense of place. That's what all I'm looking for really with whiskey anymore is give me Grandma's Kitchen, right? That we talked about in the Isle of Arran's distillery, or give me, a Scotch that I could think about drinking with my buddies, and we could go through a bottle very easily and they wouldn't even think anything of it. And so I think you all did a really good job with this. So if someone wanted to buy one of these, how would they get a hold of you all to go and purchase one of these bottles?
Well, living in America, we make the consumer side of this as easy as possible. So singlecasknation.com, all four that we tasted tonight, from the Rosary Burn 15-year-old at $145, down to the Tormore 10, the Ardnamurchan 9, the Isle of Arran Loch Ranza 8. Those three are each $100. So, and then at $300, you get free shipping. If you're not up to $300, it's a $15 flat rate to get them to your doorstep. So, we make it as simple as possible. The label we're showing tonight is what we call our e-commerce line. So these are all at singlecasknation.com. We also have, and I'm so good at my job, I don't have one to hand. It's right there. We also have this design, and this is a line, and these are only available in stores. But what we've got tonight, the four from tonight, were released in March and April, and are available on the website. So please support us. We're a good place to hang out.
Yeah, well, I would say that if you were asking my opinion, this might surprise people. The Rosary Burn was the first one we had. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to exclude that, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that one's a little bit above, right? It's 15 years old. It's got a little bit of extra oomph behind it. Man, I'm going to go with this Ardnamurchan Flarkendarken as my number one that I would go and buy. And then the Tomor and the Isle of Arran, you could pick B and C on that one. I think they're very close. But I really like the Ardnamurchan Flarkendarken. And you can coin that. We can put that on a shirt and with a Muppet. Our own drawing of a Muppet. So I really enjoyed it. I think if you were to go to singlecasknation.com right now and buy that for $100, you're not going to be disappointed. So that's my personal recommendation. But Jason, I appreciate you hanging out with me till nearly 10 o'clock on this Wednesday evening. And we look forward to having you on the episode again sometime in the future. Thank you for allowing us to be part of the nation for an evening. And thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for not being an asshole.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bourbon Lens. Make sure you're connected with Scott and I via social media on Instagram, X, and Facebook. We'd love to connect. And if you're more the professional type, follow us over on LinkedIn. If you want to know more about Bourbon Lens, make sure you're subscribed to our weekly newsletter, The Weekly Pour. For exclusive content and more, check out Patreon. Follow us there at Bourbon Lens. And last but not least, on your favorite podcast listening app, make sure you're subscribed, because every Monday, Scott and I release a podcast, and we would love to have you here listening to the newest features and the newest whiskey news. And until next time, cheers.